the middle of the field. He takes the top off the defense, as I used to say. But with him in there today, the Buffalo Bills are going to have their work cut out for him. And the reason why is because him being able to stretch the field, as I just said, that gives the tight ends the ability to go underneath that defense and be able to make those plays. I said once again that speed kills. This man is a legitimate 4-3. One thing about a 4-3, you got to honor that on that football field.
We'll be watching that today. And Adam, we've talked about it, familiar territory here for the Texans. But, I mean, the players admit, fans have lost some energy because they just want this team to get over the hump.
Well, and they're always in this spot. They have the Saturday afternoon early slot.
So why are we always? We're always here too.
This is our home away from home in the postseason. And so this has become the slot that Houston is used to. And more often than not, the Texans have disappointed here. They have disappointed last year against the Colts when they lost 21-7. They're 1-3 under Bill O'Brien in the postseason. The only game they've won with Bill O'Brien as the head coach in the postseason is against a Raider team that lost Derek Carr right before the playoffs began and had to go with Connor Cook and Matt McGloin. So this is a team that, as good as it is and as much potential as it has not stepped up and played the way it has during the regular season. And you never know what you get with this Houston team. 1 week they could look great, and the next they could look terrible. And all you have to do is look back to a game they played in the stadium earlier this year against the Denver Broncos. If they had just beaten the Denver Broncos, we wouldn't be here, and the Texans would have a bye, not the Chiefs. They would have been the number 2 seed if they beat the Broncos at home, which they couldn't do.
You know, every once in a while, I mean, I grew up watching the Harlem Globetrotters play the Washington Generals, remember? The Washington Generals, they played a good game, but you knew they were going down, right? And I just feel like there's a mindset that something's amiss here with the Texans, that they just can't get over that hump. And I think it might be a mental issue. You know, what about us? What does our group think that's keeping us from, like, extending? And what's different than the last couple of years? Deshaun's better?
Well,
yes. And Tunsil's here. The coach said, I'm going all in. I'm going to get the tackle.
Yeah.
There's a couple of pieces that are fundamentally better than they've been in the past. And I think it's vital that they show growth. Now, look, how many teams are missing the playoffs that we can just talk about that, are failing at getting in the playoffs? This team is getting in the playoffs,
Correct.
but they've got to go further, or else they're just stuck in a little bit of a neutral pattern. And I think Tunsil, Deshaun, something different this week. I mean, this year to do something special in the playoffs. And that's not today. Yeah. They have to win today. It's next week.
And think about this, all the moves they made at the running back position, too. They traded 2 different draft picks for Duke Johnson from Cleveland, Carlos Hyde from Kansas City, and they did that on the day right after they lost Lamar Miller to the torn ACL in the preseason. He tore his ACL right before Andrew Luck announced his retirement. It seems so long ago, but it's some of the things the Texans have been through and some of the pieces that they've added to overcome that exact hurdle that you're talking about.
And I will say this, too. Having spent time with this team last year at this time this year, they feel different. And Deshaun Watson admits last year he was beat up from the season. He was exhausted. They had a sloppy week of practice leading into the playoff game. All feels different this year. They sat out a bunch of guys. They feel rested.
But it looks the same.
They were cleaner and sharper.
All year.
But we'll see that. We'll see if that really makes a difference when they get
Susie
out
and the Texans at New Year's, it's a tradition unlike any other.
We're happy to be here. We love you.
Indoors.
It's a beautiful day, and it's great.
I'm not complaining.
We're not complaining. We're just getting started.
Capital One knows there's no season like bowl season. Capital One Bowl Mania on the ESPN networks, ABC, and streaming live on the ESPN app.
Postseason NFL Countdown is presented by Snickers. You're off your game when you're hungry. Eat a Snickers.
Since we're in the state of Texas, it's been 6 days since the season ended. There is no official word from the Cowboys on the status of their coaching staff. Ed Werder first reported Thursday that Jason Garrett will not be a part of the organization moving forward. But again, there's no confirmation. And Ed Werder has joined us here in Houston. So Ed, what can you tell us that's new today?
Well, Susie, I can tell you that this week of conversations with Jason Garrett have been emotionally challenging for Jerry Jones. He has a really strong relationship with his head coach, but the longer that Jones avoids holding Garrett accountable for failing to meet the expectations that the front office established for his return, the more Jones and his management of the franchise becomes an object of criticism. A source has told me that Jerry and Stephen Jones decided Garrett would not be involved with the team beyond his expiring contract, and that the Cowboys are expected to move quickly into the next phase and begin pursuing coaching candidates. There's been no confirmation that the Cowboys have contacted anybody on their list to this point. Since Garrett's contract actually expires January 14th, the Cowboys can simply let it lapse without taking any further action. But Garrett's been campaigning with the Jones family to allow him to return as a head coach for 2020. Even as one source tells me, Susie, that it's hard to imagine why Garrett would even want the job at this point. I think it suggests a lack of other options.
Ed, we know you'll continue to follow this. And look, we all know families are complicated, and this is a family business that's adding more complications. But, Mick, how does this delay impact the whole situation?
Well, a couple of things that I'd said there. Number one, Jason Garrett having a lack of options. I don't believe that he will be a head coach in this cycle. I don't believe that he'll get serious consideration. He might get an interview, but I don't think he is a primary candidate for any of the teams conducting head coaching searches. That's the first thing. You also heard Ed refer to the fact that the Dallas Cowboys have not reached out to any other candidates yet. Now, again, in their own minds, I think that they believe they're selling a top job in America. It's the head coach of America's team. Jerry can go get who he wants, and I think he's probably right. So they have been very reserved, at least publicly, and at least in terms of actually reaching out to candidates. They've requested no interviews with anybody with the league office. There's nothing on record to suggest that they proceeded in that direction at this point in time. And we wait to see how this saga drags out and plays out. But you would not expect anything out of them on Wild Card Weekend, because the NFL doesn't like when teams take away the spotlight from the games themselves. So this is on hold now until Monday at the earliest.
I'm not so sure it's a great job. You think about players today, more than ever, demand transparency and empowerment. And whoever walks in the locker room to speak to them, which is the head coach, they got to know that he speaks with authority, or else it all devolves. And I think it's been proven over time. And you look at the great teams today, those coaches walk in, they have authority. This is not a situation that the coach will have authority. And so players sense that, and they don't respond. And so I would tell Jerry, if he doesn't want Jason to coach, Jerry should coach, because he's the one that walks in the door. People will respond.
Always wanted to coach.
I'm not joking. I mean, like,
He likes
he's
Coach
gonna,
Jones.
he's going to keep. This the way it is, where he has the ultimate authority. He's going to walk in as the owner and be involved in the football day to day. He needs to coach, because the players need someone who walks in the locker room and says, this is how it is. And the Cowboys, they can hire anybody. And he walks in the door, and the coach says, this is how it is. And the player's like, I don't know. I'm not sure that's the case.
Not what Coach Jones thinks.
And that's a problem. And it's not about Jerry. It's just about an organizational problem. And if he wants to continue it to be this way, it is not going to be successful. I don't care who coaches him, unless it's Jerry Jones, because he has the authority. And players need that more than ever. So don't tell me that it's a terrible job if you think that you're going to have the authority to walk in the locker room.
It's a terrible job, except people would line up to get it.
Look, I know I don't want to make a headline. It's not a great job because you don't have the authority in the locker room for the players to believe that you have what you say goes. And that's the issue.
Randy, I was going to say, what do you believe that this franchise needs?
You know, from a player standpoint, they just need somebody to come in and take control of this team. How much control will Jerry let him have? I don't know that. But when you look at the talent on this roster is really what I'm talking about. For a head coach, when you talk about head coaches, you know, they're talking a lot about the man out in San Francisco, Solid, defensive coordinator. I think he demands a lot of authority from his defense. But like I said, Susie, when I look at this team and when you look at the roster, this team, there's no reason or no excuse why the Dallas Cowboys are not in the postseason. Everybody's pointing fingers, and yes, it does start at the top with the head coach, Jason Garrett. But when I look at this roster, there's going to be somebody, biting and nipping at the butt to be able to coach a Dallas team, because they have a lot of talent still left on this team to go and make a run for the Super Bowl.
But they always underachieve.
The guy,
Always,
look,
Steve.
the guy who's almost like the godfather of organizational structure and setup, who I think all the great coaches kind of pattern after at this point in time. Bill Walsh has said in his book, Finding the Winning Edge, it's like the Bible for some of the great coaches that have ever coached this game, says this: you cannot manage a game from the boardroom. You cannot manage a football team from the boardroom. You have to let the people who are on the ground level.
More than ever.
You have to let them set the course of the franchise. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't, as a general manager, work in conjunction with the head coach to kind of set the course of the franchise. But once it comes down to making decisions and setting the course of the franchise, and this is what you were talking about, the head coach has to be that guy. The great organizations are set up that way. Look, his own organization was set up that way at one point in time in the early 90s when Jimmy Johnson was there.
Think about it. Jimmy,
and you know what?
Independent, and he was able to speak with authority.
And I think
players knew if Jimmy said it, it's the truth.
I think what's obvious is some owners really do want to be involved. They want it to be fun for them, even if that's at the expense of winning. And when it's not fun and they want to be involved, even if that means less wins, at least they're involved. And that just seems to be, from the outside looking in, almost what happens here. And I agree with you. To coach the Dallas Cowboys, to say I'm the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, or even to say from a front office deal, if you were to say I'm the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, that carries tremendous weight worldwide. But in reality, what does it mean? That's the question.
That's the problem.
Remember when Dallas was the great drama series on TV?
Yeah.
It still is. It still is.
I think Jerry should coach. That's all I say. He should. I would love to see it. And I think he would. Would he ever think? He said he wants to, right?
Well, he always wanted to.
He would love to do that.
That's
I'm
not
kidding
happening.
you. But he's the only one who can.
Next chapter.
Thank you.
Coming up next, a couple few